Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about negative divergence and looking at the S&P 500 and some divergences that it is currently showing, what that might mean in the future, as well as talking about some other factors that may be telling us that it may be a little early to call it negative divergence. So let's go ahead and get into the chart. Okay, so first off, what is negative divergence? Divergence is simply a technical analysis tool that we use that may, now this is very important, that may signal a major positive or negative move. Now, a positive divergence occurs when the price of your stock is moving to a new low, and an indicator, such as this time right here, what we're looking at is the RSI, but we're going to look at some other indicators as well, is going up. Or as we're kind of seeing in this case, we have the S&P 500. This is a weekly chart, and we'll dive down to the daily as well, and you'll see this long-term significant move up in price. And at the bottom, we have our RSI indicator. Now, normally what will happen as price moves up, for example, if we just zoomed in right here, oh man. Okay, for example, if we just zoomed in on this section right here, which starts in September of 2018 and kind of runs to the top here in February and March, the COVID crash, you'll see that we have an upward trend in price. And at the same time, we generally have an upward trend in the RSI as well. And what that meant is, as we kind of came up here and made a higher high, right up in here, we went up and the RSI went up. Now, that is not a divergence at all. That is almost exactly what should be happening. Now, it is kind of close when you look at indicators. I think it's important to look at pivot high to pivot low. And you don't actually know if you have a pivot high until you start having a little bit of a retracement. So in this case, this is not a negative divergence at all. Let's go ahead and look back at the real-time chart. Okay, now we're looking back into current day, and you can see this week, and we're going to talk about this line in this back test and what that means as well. But we can have price continuing to move up in this direction right here. However, we do have the RSI kind of moving up. But if we were to get a pullback anywhere in here, and this is kind of turns into a pivot high, you'll go ahead and take a look at it. You'll notice significant higher high. And at this point, the RSI is really, really low. This is not financial advice. Obviously, this is just my opinion of looking at some technical indicators which are currently going on. So one of two things could be happening. This could be negative divergence. I'm sure a lot of people are looking at this and saying this is negative divergence, and this means that this is going to be a top and we're going to go ahead and crash back down. That may be the case. That may happen. But there is also another scenario which could be playing out. The other scenario which could be playing out is that this is not yet a pivot high. And even though RSI is here, we still could have a significant move in that upward direction, and that would give this RSI an opportunity to still go higher, even surpassing this high, at which point there would be no negative divergence. But let's go ahead and take a look at the daily chart. Okay, now, so if we look at the daily chart here, we have some interesting things that kind of take place, because it is a little bit easier to see some pullbacks. This was a pullback here. This was a pullback here. This was a previous high. And if we go down and look at the RSI at this high right here, this high right here had a lower RSI. And if we go way back here, obviously, if we go back here to September, this RSI was extremely high. And so on the daily chart, I would say, I would consider this absolutely negative divergence. Now, is it possible for us to still go higher and have this opportunity for this RSI to go up? Yes, it is. So there is some negative divergence happening on the S&P 500 on the daily chart as well as the weekly. But there is nothing to say that this massive run in the upward direction is over. And in the event that it goes extremely parabolic and goes straight up, it would give the opportunity for the RSI to continue this move in the upward direction, and thus negating the idea that we have ongoing negative divergence. We do have it on these last little pivots on the daily, not so much on the weekly. Now let's talk about this line that I have on the chart and what the significance is to our idea here, especially on this most recent touch. So let's go ahead and go back out to the weekly. Okay, so this is a 3-year weekly chart, and you'll see I have a trend line drawn in here which connects these highs, which has several touches. So we came down, this is 2018, we moved up. When we hit that trend line, bam, had a massive kind of revolt back. Made our comeback after the COVID crash, had a pullback right at this trend line. Look at that touch, almost perfect. Then we made another comeback and kind of had a pause here at the trend line, and then finally rode it for a little bit and then broke out. And then what happened last week? We had this move down and absolutely pinned, touched that trend line again. And what did we do? We went right back in the other direction, right back to the upside. Now, there's really no way to look at that other than this is completely a bullish indicator. Now, there are some things, obviously, that on the RSI that say that maybe we have this negative divergence, or maybe we're just going to keep up. So what are some key levels to watch? If we are going to start making this move back down to the downside, what are some levels to look at? Let's go ahead and take a look at the daily chart. Okay, so there are a couple key price levels that I am going to be watching. As long as we are above this, it is party on, rally time. The first one is going to be this low, which created a gap, and it's just below 3,800 on the SPX or 380 on the SPY, the spider. As long as we are above that gap, we can do whatever. Probably, we might retest it. We probably more than likely will retest it. If we start getting below that gap, that will be the first one. The second one, obviously, is that long-term trend line, which will keep bouncing off. If we start going down below that trend line and hanging out below that trend line, because we did break it once, but then we busted right back through it. So if we just go ahead and kind of come back and recapture that trend line, that would be another indicator for me that maybe this rally is over and we see that negative divergence play out. The other one is this level of support right here at 3,700. Now that seems like a mountain of the way on the way down the downside, but those are kind of my two lines in the sand. As long as we're above 3,800, party time, rally time, probably going higher. The next step would be, if we get down to this 37 level, which is also going to be breaking this trend line, and if we start getting below that, then maybe this negative divergence that we have on the bottom here, maybe this negative divergence does in fact play out. Okay, now I have the MACD on here as well. Same thing, looking at the SPX daily chart, and very obvious price moving up. However, our MACD, which is our moving average convergence divergence, is moving lower. And so once again, it's the same thing. So we have a potential negative divergence on the RSI, as well as a negative divergence on the MACD. So it is something to look out for, but it does not necessarily mean 100% that we are going lower. It is a little bit more pronounced, this negative divergence on the MACD, because if you look back here, we had this high with the MACD up here, this high, and this is very obviously a pivot high because we had this pullback, another rise higher, negative divergence, and then we have this move up. Look at this entire move up, this entire move right here, and we have a negative MACD. That is concerning. And there is one way to kind of draw this out, which would make it even more concerning, and I'm going to show you that right now. One of the other reasons that this could be concerning, depending on how you draw this, if you start drawing it like this, and you don't touch anything, it could look like a channel. There's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of bullish. But if you put them on an angle, now this is kind of a rising wedge pattern. And in technical analysis, normally rising wedge patterns will play themselves out to the downside. So there are several things for us to go ahead and take a look at in conclusion. We do have the potential for negative divergence in the MACD and the RSI, especially as we are reaching all-time highs in the overall market. However, calling a top can make you go very broke very fast. So I'm looking for signs and signals that maybe this might play down, and I'm being very cautious, but I am currently have some puts on the SPY, as well as I have long stock to try to take advantage of both sides. So we're going to see how this plays out, but wanted to give you a quick video showing that there is this negative divergence or potential negative divergence on the RSI in the overall market, as well as the MACD in the overall market. And what are you guys seeing out there? What do you see? Leave me a comment. Would love to see if I'm missing something. Get any other eyes on the screen.
Game over.